Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings to everyone. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Welcome to the Fourth Angels Learning Center. My name is Jadiel, and today we're on our 7 points to atonement, 7 points of atonement. We're on part 4, or the fourth point, and this is going to be very interesting. Now we're going to get more involved in the self-reflection after we've already established the pursuits, the repentance, and the establishment of the heart. The point 1 was the establishment of trust. Point 2 was the committing of our actions to do what we know is right, what we know he says. The third point was to submit our ways, which is an aspect of receiving the blessing that comes from his wisdom and his knowledge and his understanding, to change the inside, to transform the inside. I know a lot of times we could change the outside. Sometimes we could change the outside just by pursuing. Like sometimes when we are, let's say we have a lack of prayer, and then we could just, feel that remorse, establish that trust in Yah, and then we execute. Our first steps is to execute our ways, things that we know is true, by getting down on our knees, pursuing prayer, opening the scriptures, pursuing his word, things like that. So to submit your ways, the aspect of submitting our ways to him is the aspect of receiving from him from the inside, allowing him to enter in, receiving his word in the inside and allowing it to produce a fruit that he's requiring to produce in us. So a lot of times this is one of the most, it starts to get difficult at this point, because there's many aspects of the heart that Yah wants us to search. And we need his help. We need actually for him to search it. So it's very important. I want to point out a verse just to confirm that before we get started. So before we get started, I want to just give everybody the opportunity. If you desire to push us forward and support our efforts, you can support us at 4alc.com. You can also support us at Cash App at 4alc bless $4ALCBLESS. And everybody, if this is the first video that you've seen, or if you've seen this, the other videos, but you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to the YouTube page, notification bell, like it, and share this video. Allow it to bless others the way that it's blessed you, if it's blessed you. So now as we get started, I want to point out the reference that I was just making in as far as receiving, allowing Yah to enter into our heart, enter into our mind, search us out, reveal things to us that allow us to see better. There's a few verses that I wish I would have made this point in the last video, but I think that the last video was pretty clear. So look at this verse, Psalms 139. Verse 23 and 24 says, "Search me, O Elohim, know my heart, try me, and know my thoughts." So this is us asking Yah to help us in this self-examination. It says, "See if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." So if there's anything in us, reveal it to us, show it to us, so we can submit to you and go and follow you in this direction of everlasting life. Very important to us, that we need to receive more understanding in order for us to mature. Submitting our ways and receiving more is a method of pursuing maturity. Romans chapter 7, I believe, Paul makes mention of the time that he was studying the word, and he said clearly, he says in verse 7 of Romans 7, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? El forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law, for I had not known lust except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. So you see, he's receiving as he's pursuing scriptures, he's receiving from Yah. And not only is he receiving from Yah, he's submitting to the command that it's making. You know, he's submitting to the commands more as he receives more, he submits more. So the first aspect is to establish trust, to faith by remembering the things that Yah has done. The second aspect is to commit our ways and to execute, to move the hindrances that we know out of the way and to execute the actions that we know is what Yah wants us to do. The third is to submit our ways to Yah, to learn, to receive more. And the more that we receive, the more that we move. The more that we receive, the more that we grow. And the more that we receive, the more that we can execute righteousness better and better. You know, so as we move on, we're going to go to the fourth aspect, the fourth principle, which is to be afflicted, to be afflicted. And I know that this sounds, you know, many people know affliction as pain and suffering and things that comes from the outside and affects us in the inside. I want to show us a different element. As we are submitting and receiving more of his understanding, as we are examining ourselves with more wisdom, with more knowledge, and with more understanding and truth, there has to be a response to the things that we recognize now as sin. There has to be a response to that. If there's no response to that, if our relationship with sin stays the same, if we still look at it a certain way, as fun, as joyful, as all those things, and we don't recognize, based off of all the knowledge that we receive, if we don't recognize how horrible of a state sin causes us to be in, then we have a chance of falling right back into those old habits. We have to be afflicted. We have to recognize how horrible sin actually is. So before we move forward, I want to point out a few things actually, because there has to be an affliction. So let's start out at Romans chapter 7. We spoke about this already, one aspect where the knowledge of sin is the law, is his instructions. It gives us knowledge about what is wrong. Now look at what else it does. Let's see if I could pull this up. All right. So it says here, verse 10, it says, in the commandment which was ordained to life, I found to bring death. So why does Paul think it brings death? Let's look at this. Because sin, taken occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. So there's this constant learning and understanding of what's occurring inside of us, what the flesh is actually all about, what the carnal mind is actually all about. Just like what we read, David is saying in Psalms 139, hey, search me, try me, you know, lead me in the opposite direction of the wicked things that you find inside of my heart and in my mind. So look at what the commandment is doing. It's allowing to us to see that sin has deceived us, made us think that we're alive, made us think that we're strong, made us think that we're wise when we're actually none of those things at all. When we're in need, when we're in desperate destitution of in need of Yah to come in. It says, wherefore the law is holy and the commandment is holy and just and good. Now watch this, verse 13 of Romans 7. Was then that which was good made death unto me? El forbid, but sin, that it might appear sin. See that affliction? That it might appear sin to who? Yah already sees it. But that it might appear sin to you, that you may see how horrible it is. Look at what it says, working death in me by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceeding sinful. So that way our perception and our view of sin might be that we may have a reality, the actual reality of how horrible sin is and how horrible our offense was to Yah. Let me point out a few scriptures. There's quite a few in this study, just to point out some of the elements of where our minds and our hearts are going to be at this point of self-examination. Romans chapter 5. Look what it says. It says, Elohim, mighty one, commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, while we were still sinners, Messiah died for us. And I know we use the term sinners so much that it loses its emphasis on how horrible that term actually is. Let me show you in verse 10 what sinners actually means. It says, for if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to Elohim by the death of his son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. So the fact that you are sinners is the fact that we were enemies. So the idea that we can walk around with this being okay, that we're sinners, being fine with the aspect, oh, I'm still a sinner. The fact of being a sinner is the fact that you are his enemy. So while we were sinners, Messiah died. While we were his enemies, he sent his son to die for us. Let's look at that. These are past tense. Let me see if I could share my screen. These are past tense. It says, while we were yet sinners, Messiah died. And then it says, for if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to Elohim, referring to before we were reconciled, we were sinners. Before we were reconciled, we were enemies. So this is a lot of self-examination that we have to do, because if we're currently sinners, then we're currently his enemies. Now, sin is not referring to anything that you know. It's not referring to anything that you don't know. I'm sorry. Anything that you don't know. Sin is referring to things that you know. James chapter 4, verse 17. Him that knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. So sin cannot be imputed where there's no law. Romans chapter 5. So it tells us that if there's no knowledge of certain things, there can't be a magnitude of sin. We just read in Romans chapter 7 that Paul, he thought everything was all good until he looked at the law. Then he realized that there was sin in him. And not only did he realize there was sin in him, he realized death was in him as well, and that he needed a savior. He needed to be delivered. So likewise, when we self-examine ourselves, we need to recognize the state that we were in and the damage that they've done, that has done, not only to Yah, but the damage that has done to our own life, that are to our own minds, to the people around us. You know, it's not for you to be depressed and to be sad and crawl into a corner. It's for you to be acknowledging how horrible this condition is. Never to excuse the things that we have done while we were in darkness. Never to excuse. It doesn't mean don't take account. Don't take account for those things when it has been forgiven you, but don't forget the fact that this darkness that we were once in has caused pain to Yah, to his son, death to his son, and pain to the people around us, and destruction to our own life, destruction to our own mind. You know, so let's go to James. Let's go to James. James chapter 4. James chapter 4 speaks a lot about this aspect. I'm trying to make sure I point out, you know, the things that I don't want to point out for later. Let's start from verse 1. It says, from whence come wars and fightings among you? Do they not come from your lust that war in your bodies, in your members? It says, you lust and have not. You kill and desire to have. You cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you have not, because you ask not. You ask and receive not, because you ask amiss, that you may consume it unto your lust. So there's this self-examination that James is trying to emphasize on. These are the things are not going right because you are not pursuing it correctly. There's no peace because you are not pursuing the correct things. It says, you adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with Elohim. So when we're consumed in our own walk, in our own sins, in our own flaws, thinking that it's okay to have these flaws, not knowing that all those flaws is what brings enmity between Elohim and you. Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of Elohim. If you're going to look at that, if you're not going to afflict yourselves of the sin that has been committed, of the sin that you have taken pleasure in, and you constantly take pleasure in these things, you're going to fall back into these things. You're going to constantly move back and allow it to be your friend. But whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is, to be a friend of the world makes you currently the enemy of Elohim. Currently. Yah is telling us very simply. Look at what he says here. Verse 8, draw nigh to Elohim, go near to him. Draw near, and he will draw near to you. Go near to him, and he will go near to you. Cleanse your hands. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners. Purify your hearts. He didn't say stay the same, you sinners. Cleanse your hands. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Look at what it says in verse 9. Be afflicted. Be afflicted and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Master, and he shall lift you up. Very important for us to understand. This is not just, this doesn't mean to be guilty, to walk around depressed, to walk around insecure. It means to walk around in the reality of how horrible our life, our actions, our thoughts, our sins are to Yah. This mindset is what allows us to despise that way of living, to despise those actions, those old actions. This type of mindset is what keeps us from moving backwards and allowing us to consistently move forward. Let's go to the book of Psalms. We're going to be in the book of Psalms for a while. Let's go to Psalms 119. We're going to start at verse 50. Let's go to verse 50. We're going to look at a few verses, and I think we're going to solidify this point. Psalms verse 50, look at what it says. This is my comfort in my affliction, for your word has made me alive. Why is the comfort in the affliction? Why is the affliction his comfort? Why? If you are, let me explain. If you do not feel, if you do not despise sin, if you do not feel the conviction, if you do not, it's kind of like the conviction of the ruach, the conviction of the spirit is kind of like a sign of life. It's kind of like when, like when we go to the doctor and they check our reflexes, sometimes they take your feet and they stub your toe so that to see if you feel anything. Like the conviction is a sign of life. So to not be afflicted by what is disgusting and horrible and dangerous, there's a comfort in knowing that I know what is wrong, because now I can make wise decisions. There was a man who used to be in the street, and somebody asked him and they said, are you're not afraid of nobody? And he said, he says, if I'm not afraid of anybody, then I'm foolish. I'm going to make foolish decisions and I can get killed faster. You always got to be afraid of certain aspects in order to make the correct choices. So when you're looking at sin and you're looking at yourself, you have to be aware of the consequence of sin, the danger in pursuing sin, and just the pain and the horribleness of what it has done to Yah. It has killed his son. Sin has killed his son. So just to put it in that aspect, recognizing the affliction, recognizing the horribleness of sin is my comfort, because now I can make my pursuit of the word of Yah. Now I can make my pursuit to understand his ways and to move further away from my own ways and not to trust myself. Let's look at another verse. Let's go to verse 67 in Psalms 119. Look what it says here. It says, before I was afflicted, I went astray. So when he didn't feel no affliction, he went astray. He felt okay. The same thing Paul says in Romans chapter 7. He says, before the law, I was alive once. In his own mind, he was alive and well until he came in contact with the understanding of the law. Then when he understood what the law was saying, he looked at himself correctly, and he was grievous because of what it was doing to him. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, David says here in verse 67. But now have I kept your word. So because of affliction, because of this affliction, after it has come, after I've been understanding and recognizing how horrible sin is, I am now able to understand the difference and pursue his word. It says, you are good and do good and teach me your statutes. No one else is good. For the fact that we recognize we are not good is also the what allows us to pursue salvation or redemption for our sinfulness. This is why it says that the law is a schoolmaster to bring you to Messiah, because it's supposed to show you that you need him, that you need redemption, that you need atonement. Let's continue to look at this. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I have kept your word. Let's look at verse 71. It is good for me that I have been afflicted. Now, remember, this is not talking about just feeling pain from other people or pointless hurt from people's foolish actions. This is a self-reflection. It was good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. There's many times where outside afflictions can bring lessons to help us. Sometimes we dealing with people that's not really walking according to Yah's ways, that bring that hurt, that pain to us, that allow us to learn to make better choices and better decisions according to his word, according to his statutes and principles. It is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. Verse 45, I know, O Yahuwah, that your judgments are right, and that you in faithfulness have afflicted me. That in Yah's faithfulness, he has afflicted us. You see, when we move that stuff away and we think that establishing our trust, committing our ways, receiving and submitting to his ways, it's going to bring about just like this, roses and flourishing. No, it brings about more salvation. It brings about more deliverance of more things that's inside of the heart and inside of the mind. Yah now establishes our relationship with him, creates a solidified point where we become dependent and immovable from trusting in him. So now he can go through the process of purging us by allowing us to be afflicted, by allowing us to see the things that is wrong inside of us in a clear sense, and remorse for those things, and mourn for those things, weep for those things, as James said in James chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. To be afflicted, it allows us to pursue. It is good that I have been afflicted, that I may learn your statutes. It's good that we see this sense of danger and the sense of wickedness, that we can depend on Yah, pursue him, and receive a blessing constantly, so we won't turn back. Yah is not revealing these things to you so that way you can run away from him. Yah is revealing these things to you so you can run to him, so you can hold on to him. What did Jacob do? What did Jacob do when he recognized his state? What did Jacob do when he recognized how close danger and death was to him? He held on to the angel. He did not want to let go until he was blessed, until he received. He allowed his affliction to bring blessings. Even after he left, he was still limping, on his staff. That affliction didn't just disappear. And wrestling with the angel dislocated his leg. And in that pain, in that affliction, he held on and said, I'm not letting go until you bless me. Yah blessed him, changed his name to Israel. He got up and he's limping now. Sometimes Yah doesn't take away the affliction. He allows it to be a memorial, so that way you can constantly pursue Yah and you don't fall back into the same things that you once were in. So to be afflicted is to recognize how filthy certain things are, to pursue cleanliness, to confess and agree with Yah about how horrible sin is and the consequence of sin, to confess and to agree with Yah. Let me show you another verse. Psalms 119, all the way in the beginning, second stanza, verse 9, it says, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed according to thy word. With my whole heart I have sought thee. Let me not wander from your commandments. You see that? He knows what he's prone to doing. He knows, and he's recognizing who he is. He's recognizing he needs cleansing. He's recognizing that he wanders. Let me not wander from your commandments. Your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. He knows that he's prone to sin. He wants to be delivered completely. So he's not just going to focus on the fact that he was cleansed. He's going to focus on the fact that he does not want to move away from his commandments again. But he's not only going to focus on that, he's going to focus on the fact that he doesn't want any type of sin, even inside of his heart. It's not just about the outward appearance. It's not just about the outward demonstration and the actions. It's also about the thoughts and the heart. He wants every part of him to be clean. So the fourth point is to continuously be afflicted of sin. Do not allow your children to think that sin is okay in any way. Do not allow yourself to belittle the dangers of what sin can do inside of you. Scripture says in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, says a little leaven leavens the whole lump. Don't allow sin in your household. Don't allow leaven in your household, like Feast of Unleavened Bread. Do not allow leaven in your house. Do not allow sin to cultivate, to raise things up in your household. Don't allow it in your children. Don't allow it in the midst of your friends. Don't allow it at your job. Now, it doesn't mean go to outside of your environment and try to control someone else's environment. No, I'm saying don't allow it to come to you. Don't compromise at all. Make sure you stand firm on what is right, what is true, and that you recognize the affliction of sin at all times. So you don't allow yourself to go back into that same old thing, don't allow your mind to be focusing on how pleasurable things were in the past. Push your mind forward. We're going to talk about that. That's one of the points of atonement as well. But be afflicted, recognize and understand and constantly recognize how horrible your sin is. And don't allow sin in the midst of your children. Don't allow sin in the midst of your friends. Don't allow sin in the midst of your dealings in your workplace, in anything. Allow purity, allow cleansing, allow truth to flourish in everything that you do. It can only happen like that when you're constantly recognizing that you were once in this horrible state, and it has to be in your mind a horrible state, and that you do not want to go back there. Allow it to afflict your heart, and allow Yah to bring that joy to you. You know, that forgiveness, saying I'm gonna make atonement for you. We are one. I'm gonna reconcile. You will be reconciled to me completely. You know, so praise Yah. I hope that this was a encouraging message to you. It was so important for us to meditate on and to examine ourselves with. So I look forward to the next study with you. Shalom, everyone. Shalom, shalom. Thank you guys for joining our study today. I hope that it was edifying. And if you want to support this ministry, you can support us on 4alc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube page. Click the like button and the notification bell. I hope to see you guys on the next study. Shalom, guys.